My name's Tim Walter, I'm a house healer and an alternative life coach. On this channel I show you how to reach a greater sense of well-being through simple, practical, spiritual practices such as meditation, mindfulness and dowsing. Some people refer to the work that I do as magical, but somebody that knows a lot about real magic is author and magician Gary M Vasey. Here now is the second part of a recent interview with Gary, recorded over Zoom. Very interesting what you were saying about ceremony, because I understand that it's a reinforcement of the intent, of the intention. It's a practice. You put yourself into a ritual position. You're not only doing it for your own benefit in that sense, but I actually think that you're also tapping into the ancestors when you're doing that ritual work and pulling all of their rituals sort of into this moment as well. But that's my interpretation, I guess, really, more than anything else. I don't know. I mean, do you agree with that at all? Or?
I do. Yeah, I think you're basically working with the energies in a much stronger way, whatever those energies are, whether they're ancestral or earth energies or elemental energies or whatever you want to call them. When you dress up and you become, for example, one of the things that I've been doing a lot of recently is I'm very interested in the Slavic deities and the Slavic hierarchy of deities. And because I live in a country, Czech Republic, a Slavic country, and wanted to explore this country and its culture, I decided, well, why, and it's a long story how I got into it, but why don't I assume some of the god forms and see what happens? And this is a magical technique. It's an imaginative technique, although you could make it a ritualistic. It's a ritual inside your mind, really.
Right.
And what I do is I research the god or the goddess that I'm interested in. I find as much as I can their characteristics, how they looked, how they're supposed to behave, any animal totems, that kind of thing. And then in meditation, I imagine them in front of me. I visualize them in front of me, and then I step into them and become them. And this can cause some really amazing things to happen in terms of knowledge just suddenly arrives in your mind like a little packet of information, and it just goes and opens up into this huge piece of information that just came out of nowhere. And I have to write that down real quick, otherwise you forget it when you come back to normal consciousness. But some of the most amazing pieces of information have arrived in my head using this particular technique. And then the most amazing physical things can happen. I was walking through, I live below the castle here in Brunner, Spielberg Castle, and it's got a beautiful park around it. It's on a hill and you get beautiful views of the city. And so I would walk around imagining myself as Perun, the god of thunder, or one of the other gods. And this particular day, I really got into it. I could feel the muscle mass. I'm not a muscular person, but I could feel that I was a muscular person, muscle mass. And 3 butterflies just came up into my field of view. 1 landed on my head and 2 landed on my body. And I stood there with these butterflies on me. And I mean, if that isn't a sign, I don't know what is.
That's superb, isn't it? Absolutely superb. And of course, butterflies, sort of, to me, certainly conjure up images of transition.
Of renewal and transition.
Exactly. Yeah. So which is exactly what we were doing there. Brilliant. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I think I would say I would put a sort of a little word of warning to people watching this or listening to it, that it takes practice. What you've just described is not something to be done kind of like, just ad hoc and think, oh, this is a good idea, let's do that. I want to stress that you, Gary, have had years of experience and have got to that point with a certain process and done it safely. So I don't recommend it as a ritual practice that anybody just kind of jumps into that sort of idea. So just putting that in as a caveat, because you and I are both aware of the power of what you've just described. So, but brilliant, yeah. I mean, it's absolutely true. One of the things that struck me there, as you were starting that description of what happened to you there, was actually looking at it from the other point of view. When we do trance work, for example, and we invite a specific spirit guide into our space, it's almost like, in a way, they're doing a similar thing. You were going into their space, whereas trance work is inviting that energy. But again, you're doing the same thing, aren't you? It's both ways, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, absolutely. It's the same sort of technique, just using it in a slightly different way, using it to learn and to hopefully, do something good, reactivate some energy perhaps, or work with some energy in order to perhaps, I mean, it's almost, when we talked, it made me think, that what you do in your house healing work is on a microcosmic scale what a magician does when they're working with the energies sort of globally. You're working in a house trying to, build an energy that's positive for the person who's living there. And what I'm doing is I'm going out into the Czech countryside and I'm trying to make the natural energies more powerful so that they have a more positive impact on the country or on the world. Yeah. So it's just it's the same thing with very similar methods, with similar objectives, if you think about it. In that
I completely agree, and that's one of the things that I love about the work. I mean, I think about what I do as like keyhole surgery, going in and just fiddling around with this very specific spot. Fiddling around, that's a very casual way, a cavalier way of describing it, but you know what I mean. But I definitely, as far as I'm concerned, one of my processes when I'm working with a client is to help them understand actually their role in their own creation and their own creative ability. So their access to the magic, to the magical powers, to the powers of creation. I guess one of the differences maybe between you and I is that I do try as much as possible to really emphasize being in alignment with divine will. But then I sometimes also feel that, well, that's a bit of a cop-out, but it's not. I mean, there's a balance to be gained. But one of the things that I am very not sure about, but I feel strongly about is that the human aspect of what we perceive to be the individual has a role to play in all of this work. So when in spiritual teaching, spiritual schools, when the ego is banished and the attempt to attain enlightenment through abandoning the ego completely and utterly is to me not necessarily a way that I want to follow, because actually there is always an aspect, as far as I'm concerned, I recognize the role of the individual. We are manifested, created in this form, and therefore we have a perception that we share from one individual point of view in one individual context.
Well, I don't think you can get rid of the ego anyway. And I mean, the ego is always there and always at play, and you can't. I mean, it's I don't think anybody human can do that. I may be proven wrong. Maybe Jesus. When you read the Bible, that's the impression I get, is that person was capable of removing the ego from the whole thing. I think divine will. I talk anyway about the powers that be, and hopefully I'm doing what the powers that be would like me to do. I'm not doing anything. I don't use magic like from a sorcery point of view. I don't. I'm tempted, but I don't. I don't try to generate wealth or influence or win over women or any of those things. I think that's misuse by and large. Some people do. I know that, and they feel it's appropriate to do it. But I believe in karma, and I think if you force your will on somebody, you're going to see an effect at some point back to balance the books, and I'd rather not be on the end of that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. I mean, absolutely, 100%. So let's bring this back round. We'll just wrap up. I'm interested.
What about dragons? Dragons.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was coming back to. I was coming back to dragons. I was kind of coming back there, but I was going to come at it from a slightly obtuse angle, which was about earth energy, because obviously earth energy lines are quite often referred to as dragon lines. So you spoke of dragons as you concluded your description of what a magician was. I'm sort of interested in Gary's view of dragons, but also I'm interested in earth energy, like the way that you have become very fond of and attached to, and are exploring earth energy, and through the earth energy lines, the network of the country in which you live. But just tell me a little bit about that.
Well, a few years ago, well, yeah, a couple of years ago, with some friends of mine in the UK, who are doing some work with the UK countryside, I began to realize that when there are legends of dragons, those dragons seem to be associated with earth energies or a manifestation of earth energies. So after that weekend of working with them, I came to the Czech Republic and I started Googling for dragons. And I discovered that this analogy works here too, that where people talk about dragons, there are earth energies manifesting themselves. And the funny thing was I went to Velehrad with a Czech friend who's sort of half a believer. Velehrad, there's a big Catholic church there that goes back a long time and probably is on the pagan site, so on. And we went into the church and I said to him when we got close to the altar area, I said, wow, feel the energy. And for the first time, he says, do you know, I think I can, feel the energy. For me, my hair was standing up on end. It was like incredible. And there were people there trying to use the energy for healing purposes. And it had a reputation for healing. And so we spent some time talking about the energy and where the energy really was. It was actually in both sides of the altar where they built like little alcoves, if you want. And it was in two locations, it seemed to me, either side of the altar. So then we came out the building, we were walking around the side, just talking, he was just asking questions. And I look up at the magnificent cathedral building and I said, oh, look, would you believe it? There's a dragon. And he knew my theory of dragons. He turns around, he looks, and sure enough, where there was two pipes, drainage pipes coming off the back of the building over these two alcoves where the energy was, and each was finished with the head of a dragon.
Oh,
and he
wow.
said to me, do you think that's deliberate? I said, I'm absolutely convinced it is. I think that a lot is hidden in plain sight. And I think the Catholic Church is well aware of some, or parts of the Catholic Church are well aware of earth energies and some of this symbolism. And then we went into the basement, the crypt, I guess, and there'd been an archaeological dig. And the archaeologists were puzzled over the fact that they found like a 14th century, very magnificent floor tile emblazoned with a dragon. And the comment was, why would you find a dragon, a symbol of evil, in the middle of a church? Well, because it's not the symbol of evil, it's the symbol of earth energies. And that's why. And it's very strong here. So what I started doing was researching all these dragon myths and legends, and then going to the place where the dragon was seen to see what I could find. And what I find dowsing, and just with my now sensitivity, was hills with magnificent earth energies. Some instances flowing freely, in other instances not having been messed with. And a good example of that is there's a place called Hoska Castle here that has been featured on all kinds of these supernatural shows and has a reputation for being the gate of hell. And so the story goes is that this castle was built in the middle of nowhere, has no water supply on these limestone rocks, sandstone rocks. And it was built to keep something in as opposed to keep something out. And the story goes that there was a big hole in this rock that went down for thousands and thousands of feet, and that demons and strange creatures would come out and steal sheep and drag them back into hell. And so the people built something with a chapel, blocked the hole, put a chapel on top. The chapel's got some incredible symbolism painted on the walls that could go into some other time. And it's the gate of hell. Well, I went there with my son last Sunday and with my dowsing rods, and I could feel the energy 10 kilometers away, and just written a blog article about it. It's all explained there. But I found like where the energy lines were going into the vortex, they'd placed massive stone crosses. So they were blocking off the energy, and they'd built a chapel over the top to stop the energy because they were afraid of it. And so basically what you have there is a natural energy gone bad, in my opinion. It's been messed with, And this is why it gives a very negative feel, and why it's associated with ghosts and ghoulies and demons and so on and so forth. There's nothing I can do, unfortunately, because there's a big castle built over the top of it. But I strongly think that this is what is going on in that particular area. The energy itself is just normal earth energy that could be used positively, but it's been messed with by humans in a way that has disrupted the flow.
Yeah, and you know what that brings to mind for me actually is the Delphic Oracle, because what you've got in both places, and this is you'll know as a scientist that this is often the case, when you've got a fissure in the geology, you get all sorts of natural, I can only call it natural emanations, but you know, chemicals and all sorts of you know, electrostatic sort of fields of energy coming off. I mean, electrostatic might not be the right term, but anyway, you've got fields of energy coming off, which can affect the functioning of the brain. So often these places are quite, you know, what we would call power. They are power centers because they affect the physiology of the human being. Therefore, they open up the imagination and the ability to connect to what we would call the other side of the veil. So it sounds to me very much like, on one hand, for the Delphic Oracle, you've got a place that actually was embraced and used as a very positive. Thank you, Jesper. I just let my dog finish scratching in the background because that's going to come out on the thing. Okay, so on the one hand, we've got the Delphic Oracle that was used very much as a sort of embraced and used for very positive, let's say, broadly speaking, positive purposes for a long time in its ability. You know, you'd have the individual sitting there and they would be, you know, foretelling the future, etc., etc., etc. What you've got there in the Czech Republic is completely the opposite. It's actually, interestingly, you have found like a highlight of a fear center, because that's how it has been dealt with in the past. And I say interestingly because obviously you, as a creative person with your background, that you came into it all with fear as a driver. Do you see what I mean? As a child, you were quite fearful.
Yeah.
What you found is a really interesting center that is reflecting back that fear that, you know, other people have also shared, and they've done this to this center of what was actually, as you have said, probably a hugely beneficial point. It's just that people's fear goes whoa, and it gets reflected back, and you get all sorts of nasty stuff happening. So really interesting, really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, what I have been doing is I felt kind of, when I came here for a lady and the relationship is ended, but my daughter stay here for my daughter, and so I felt kind of alien in an alien world, and I never really connected with. You know, I would go to England and feel that sense of relief, you know, and the Czech Republic seemed to me to be very sort of a negative atmosphere. But by getting out into the countryside and chasing dragons and working with the energies here, I find that I've developed a connection now. I take Czech people out into the countryside and show them places they've never seen and tell them stuff they never knew. And they're like, my goodness, an Englishman is showing me my own country, you know? Wow. And so I feel like I've really developed a connection now with the land, and I feel comfortable here. I enjoy, you know, I'm mapping lines with my dowsing rods through the castle and in other areas. I'm trying to understand, you know, the patterns. I've been looking at Templar sites as well, along a particular river valley, along with some old pagan and Catholic sites, sort of mapping out lines and trying to understand what's going on. And hopefully in the process, maybe even reactivating and you know, bringing that energy into manifestation more than it was because it was lying dormant.
So your connection really has really helped you in a sort of a healing process to feel far more settled.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I wrote all about. I started writing about that in my last book, which was called Chasing the Shaman or Shaman, and that was kind of peculiar because I bumped into accidentally a practicing shaman in the local area here. I didn't speak to the man. I wish I had, and then I was a bit sort of put off by what he was doing, and then I kept seeing his signs all over my neighborhood. And so I began to chase him, trying to find him, because I wanted to discover, who he was, what he was doing, maybe learn from him. I never did, and it eventually came to an end with a particular message, which I documented this, plus my experience of working with energies in this book, you see. And this guy would leave in plain view the most amazing designs in stones and animal bones and horns and things on the ground that people never, only I noticed, nobody else noticed these things. But I've photograph after photograph, and he would go back and he'd leave a little tobacco offering on one of the stones and rearrange it slightly, and he was doing, and then go away again. So I kept trying to catch him, but never did.
It's really interesting. It's fantastic. It's lovely I could listen to you for a long time. Next time, because we'll do this again, I think, if you're willing, at some point in the future, we'll catch up again.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
It's really interesting. One of the things I'd like to talk about next time is the Templars. I think that would be very interesting, to pick your brains a little bit about what you know about that. I would also just say, this is your opportunity to have a bit of blatant self-promotion, Gary. You have blogs, you've talked about your books. What would you like?
Well, I have a website called GaryMVasey.com, but I've gone back to an old WordPress site for the blogging, which is at GaryMVasey.net. Apologies for the confusion. It's not deliberate. It's just that the WordPress community is a better place to blog, I think. So I have a website and a blog. So if you want to read about Hosker Castle, for example, GaryMVasey.net is where you'll find it. I have if you're interested in ghost stories, I have a ghost website called My Haunted Life 2, as in or as well, myhauntedlife2.com. And I basically, people can submit stories, and I, with barely any editing or anything, I just repost them. And there's about 5 years, all kinds of weird stories there. If you're interested in my books, I've written books on magic and ghosts and black-eyed kids and meditation and all kinds of things, and you just find me on Amazon. I tend to write as G. Michael Vasey, because at one point I wanted to keep my professional and private life separate, but then Google destroyed all that because it realized I was the same person.
Yeah. Yeah, the all-seeing eye of Google. Yeah.
I don't know there's anything you can do about that. So now I'm G. Michael Vasey or Gary M Vasey, whichever way you want.
Okay, yeah.
Enjoyed talking to you on my show. Enjoyed talking to you again, and yeah, let's keep it going.
Yeah, absolutely. Good man. Thank you very much. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Gary. It's been a real pleasure.
No problem.